So ADF International is a legal organization focused on legal advocacy. We are a Christian organization working across the Christian spectrum, so across denominations. And we work on legal advocacy. So we work through the legal means that are available, which is litigation, work, being a voice, also bringing cases that will actually set precedents in jurisprudence in how we interpret law, national and international law today, on questions that really affect culture, such as religious freedom, freedom of conscience, freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, and how much what these freedoms are, how they should be interpreted. And of course we see that there are many debates around these issues in the wider culture, but they often originate and actually are articulated in legal questions. Yeah, when we hear persecution, we think, and we should think probably first and foremost of countries where people are physically persecuted, either for their religious belief or because they voice an opinion critical to the government, or they just use their right to express themselves freely, and they're physically in prison, persecuted, sometimes even tortured, or even killed for it. So that is what we often think is the persecution that takes place, and it's true, it takes place. But I think we see a kind of persecution happening in our Western world as well, where we see that the state, or also the general culture, but then it articulates in laws, is there's a real viewpoint discrimination going on. So if you think in a certain way, if you have, let's say, a conservative opinion on something, if you are, let's say, pro-life and not pro-abortion, you have your right to freely express yourself, to take part in life as everyone else, is at least challenged, let's say. And it is often legally challenged. Our position is that the state is bound to neutrality and should not discriminate or treat someone less, basically limit the rights of someone or question the fundamental freedoms of someone because they hold a totally legitimate opinion that may differ from a mainstream or from a vocal opinion, but that should be totally legitimate in a free society. Legally speaking, no role, because they don't have a competence on life. So the European law cannot have a legal position on when life should begin or how it should be protected and so on. But of course we know that a lot that happens at the European level, at the European Union level, is what is generally called soft law. So you create a consensus. For example, the European Parliament can create a resolution on whatever topic it wants, even though it's not within the EU law competency. And so what we see that happening, we saw it recently with the Matic report. The European Parliament can form an opinion that is not legally binding, but it is still an official opinion of the Parliament and voted with a majority. And so we see this very regularly happening, that there is a resolution, for example, passed that doesn't have, wouldn't oblige the countries in a legal way, but it creates a consensus, right? It says, well, we should have a right to abortion, for example, which does not exist in international law. What we have in international law in any treaty is we have a right to life, enshrined, black and white. We do not have a right to abortion in there. We know there are groups who would like to see it there. Macron recently said it in Brussels. He would like to have that. Right, but we also see that at the UN, for example, there have been attempts for now over 10 years to get that into UN resolutions, and it has failed for 10 years because it's not in the international law. And so you can't just put in whatever you want. And so, the role of the European Union is, I would say, there is a role it plays because it does form a political consensus. And if you, establish that consensus more and more, it of course gives a good reason for example, countries to pass a law on abortion because it's supposedly the international consensus. That's what we call soft law, right? It's not legally binding, but then eventually, especially at the national level, it becomes hard law. In terms of legal competence, there is no competence on the question. And I think, and that's the role of ADF International, is very much to remind the international institutions and the courts of what is actually written in the treaty, what actually the international community has come to agree on, and you find there everywhere a right to life, and what the international community has not agreed on in the treaties, and to remind them and to, call into sort of, quote what is actually in the treaties. Yeah, so this is an interesting case. It's called Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization. It's a case that now arrived at the Supreme Court, and that for the first time indeed challenges Roe versus Wade, challenges that extremely liberal abortion scheme that we have in the United States in '73, and that has of course been, as often, a role model for other countries to go along that line, right? So it has a significance beyond the United States just because it's a very important country, and people look to that jurisprudence as well. So it's an interesting case because it challenges that paradigm of Roe v. Wade, basically, make abortion liberal with no further requirements. The case basically poses the question: can at the state level, is a state in the United States free to make abortion a little bit more restrictive than Roe v. Wade? That's the basic question at stake. And what will happen, we don't know yet. We don't know. There was a very interesting hearing in the court, but we really don't know what will happen. We await the judgment. But what is interesting is there was an international Amicus Courier brief. So that's a brief to the court where legal scholars come together or experts on the topic and say, we believe that this and that is relevant in the case and it should be decided so and so, or here are arguments how we understand the case. So there was an international brief by legal scholars, and 141 legal scholars signed the brief, which is amazing, from around the world, from Asia, from Latin America, from everywhere. And that was from Spain. Legal scholars here signed. And that was interesting because when you put your signature under such a brief that clearly says there's a right to life, there's no right to abortion, it is actually legitimate for the court to say that there should be flexibility on how to regulate abortion. There was also a brief, an international brief, from the pro-abortion side, and 8 people signed up to that. So that's an interesting phenomenon, right? That we could think, if you have a pro-life view, or if you actually understand the law as protecting life, you're basically alone. It's not really the case. 140 signed on to the brief, speaking clearly in favor of a right to life in international law, and 8 signed on the other brief. So it's just an interesting phenomenon. I don't know what will happen. It's open, but it is, for the first time since Roe v. Wade, it is the strategic sort of moment when that could be challenged. Yeah, so that's exactly the angle we take on these cases. We are involved in some of those cases because, when you think, especially in the US-American context, sports is something extremely important, not just because it's fun and you compete and so on, but it gives you access to higher education. Many of the scholarships in colleges are based on being good in sports. That's just how it works there. So, young girls train for years and years to be really competitive, be really good, to have access to a good college, for example, or a good university. So it's more than just the sports question. It's really access, of young students to good education, often linked to sports. Now, it is of course profoundly unjust that a girl that has been training for this, that has been at the top, has no chance anymore of winning. And that's exactly what happened in the swimming competition last week. And that is a matter of justice, really. Should you basically make it impossible for female athletes to have the slightest chance of winning because they are female and they have a female body? Because now a man who identifies as a woman can compete in the women's section. And so we do think this is a real fundamental question of justice. We do believe this is unjust, and we also believe that we should be able to still affirm, we should agree on the basic sort of criteria of who is a man and a woman, that biological reality should actually play the main role here. You know, that doesn't mean that we fall into stereotypes of what a man and what a woman exactly should do, how they should live their life, but that there is a biological reality that is a scientific reality should not be excluded from the debate. It should be the central, because it's the most objective basis of it. And so once you depart from that, well, you know, it can become anything. And then we see the consequences of that can be really very tangible injustices. In this case, you know, it's young female athletes who suffer from this. And so there are other cases, similar cases, the bathroom battle cases, you know, that where adult males who self-identify as women have free access to the girls' shower rooms in school. I mean, you see obviously that there's a security threat, right? When they can shower with 10-year-old girls. And so there are really injustices that we have to address, and we're doing it. I don't think that we will see a reversal of the cultural trends we are seeing anytime soon, but the question is not that we see a secularization, and more than a secularization, we see a real breakdown of any consensus in society of the fundamental questions. And the most fundamental one that we see where we have disagreement today is, who is man? In the generic sense, men and women, who is the human person? And so from there, you can derive the questions of what should dignity mean? You know, is dignity a right to die in euthanasia, or is dignity actually to have your life protected from the beginning to the end? I mean, what should freedom mean? Like, all those questions derive fundamentally from a question around who is the human being. And of course, that question is ultimately linked of where do we come from? And we as ADF International believe that we are a Christian organization. We believe that we are created in the image and likeness of God, and that is the most fundamental reason that we have dignity, or that we have freedoms that the state cannot just take away. And so, can we stop that? Well, no. I think this disagreement, or the consensus is not there anymore, because we are largely not believers anymore in God. We may have nominally a majority of Christians still in some countries, but you know, it doesn't mean that people are actually having really that worldview. And so as we are moving away from that, and as we are, you know, our countries are moving into post-Christian times, it's no surprise, of course, that this has consequences for how we see the human being, and then what we think the laws we should make about this. It's no surprise, really. I don't think we will reverse that trend magically overnight, or even in the next 10, 20 years. But I think the interesting question is, okay, for those who still have that worldview, what is our role in these times of cultural change? And I think our role should not be just to say, oh my God, we cannot go back to how it was 30, 40 years ago. But we should say, well, maybe we have also been very, very comfortable with this majority or supposed majority. And we have not really been good at articulating our vision. And I think today there is a new need and urgency to articulate the vision we have. I don't think we can, but I think we live in extremely interesting times of profound cultural change. And there will be, and there are indeed, we already see that happening, you know, new kind of the creative minority, right? Voices that raise and say, okay, here's what we actually stand for, because we are challenged to articulate it better and to say, what do we actually stand for? And so I'm not so much afraid of moving away from that consensus, even though, you know, it's not a comfortable situation. But I think it gives us a very interesting challenge to impact this culture in a very crucial moment. And I think we can do an ever better job at it.
Well, thank you very much, Sophia. We finished here.
You're welcome.